Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, sometimes known as Brangelina, are getting a divorce, which is an important story because, actually, I don't know what the end of that sentence is. But news that the star of World War Z was being divorced by the woman whose totally nude sex scene beginning 1 hour and 37 minutes and 14 seconds into the film Original Sin made me forget what I was saying. Brad Pitt told reporters, quote, "I was like totally surprised to discover Angelina was not charmed and delighted by the fact that I was banging my co-stars on other movies. How could she not love the fact that I was smoking so much dope that I finally began to understand why Ocean's 13 is such a classic motion picture, or at least a mind-blowing series of hallucinations passing between my eyelids and an inner universe that extends from my retina to that weird dimension in Interstellar where Matthew McConaughey floated around like an idiot in a part I could have absolutely killed," unquote. Pitt went on to say he was saddened by the breakup and wanted only the best for his children if he had any, which he couldn't remember, but if he did, he wished them well and hoped to see them sometime if he happened to be around where they were. He said he regretted how much he'd hurt Angelina and had always thought he was just so hot and rich that she would consider herself lucky to have him whatever he did. In an interview with Variety, Pitt added, quote, "Look at this face. Look how handsome it is. How can my wife not love it? My mistress loves it. Or maybe my wife loves it and my mistress doesn't. I always get those two confused. Which is the one who's divorcing me?" Unquote. As for Angelina Jolie, she said she had been absolutely shocked to find that her husband was sleeping with other women who hadn't adopted 47 handicapped children and weren't constantly yammering on about poverty in some godforsaken hellhole in who knows where, Africa or someplace, instead of making him dinner. She told The Hollywood Reporter, quote, "I never imagined when I stole Brad away from Jennifer Aniston that he could be unfaithful. And I don't understand why he would run off with some young chippy with a sense of humor when he could be with someone who takes herself as seriously as I do. I just assumed he married me because he cared about world peace. He said something about peace, I remember. You're a nice piece, I think it was. I feel so betrayed." News of the Brangelina breakup broke the hearts of the couple's fans and many other people with nothing better to think about. Arguments broke out on Twitter about which of the stars should now be called Bran and which one Jelena. As one fan put it, quote, "I am absolutely devastated to find that my life is so empty, I'm paying attention to the crappy love lives of essentially boring people who don't know I exist. Also because there won't be a sequel to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mostly it's about the sequel," unquote. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, ipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
The greatest video ever made. That's what that, bar none, that is the greatest. And yesterday I paid tribute to Cynthia Angulo, whose incredible graphics those are. But I forgot, Lindsay, before she left, Lindsay put in so much work on the music on this. It just incredible orchestration and everything. And of course, the Daily Wire singers, a professional group who they tour constantly. And, you know, we were just lucky to be able to get them. And if you subscribe to the Daily Wire, you cheap so-and-so, you could not only watch that, but you could watch the entire show on the Daily Wire website. You can watch 15 minutes of it on Facebook or YouTube, and then we cut you off like the cheap nothings that you are, and you have to get us on iTunes and the SoundCloud. And you know, the other reason to subscribe, of course, is the mailbag for a lousy $8. You not only get me, you get me for $1.37, and then the rest goes to Ben Shapiro, and also you get to be in the mailbag, and you do get Ben's show as well. All right. I did my first Facebook Live yesterday. Yeah, it was very, you had it with the phone and everything. It was like the world of wonders, man. It was like suddenly people are asking. That was to pitch my book, The Great Good Thing, A Secular Jew Comes to Faith in Christ. And now listen, even if you didn't pre-order it, you have to buy it now, because now I'm being attacked by Jews. I'm already being attacked by anti-Semites. Really, I feel like it's a pincer movement. I get attacked by the alt-right anti-Semites who are calling me, "You dirty Jew." And now the Jews are writing articles on like websites that I contribute to. These are like my colleagues, What do you mean you became a Christian? You can't do that. One guy said, "You can't become a Christian until you're seriously a Jew." And I thought, well, if I knew you made the rules, I would have checked in with you first. But I thought you were just some guy, So anyway, You have to buy the book because you have to, save me from, from the fact that I'm being overrun. All right. And, the reason I wrote this book, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more next week, but one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I feel that the narrative is such a powerful force. You call it the intellectual current, the intellectual atmosphere of the time, just this world we live in. I always think about George Washington, this man of incredible virtue who gave away a kingdom. Nobody in history has ever given away a kingdom. He held it in his hands and he said, nope, I want you to be free. Take the kingdom away. And he had that much virtue. And yet when his slaves escaped, he was like, why'd they escape? We treated them so well. He didn't understand. That's because he was immersed in the intellectual atmosphere of his time. And we all are. And I feel the intellectual atmosphere of our time is relentlessly secular, relentlessly unbelieving. And I wanted to show how one person came out of that atmosphere in Hollywood and New York, where it's thick as it can possibly be. But that narrative also applies to the stuff that's going on today. They've now declared a state of emergency in Charlotte, North Carolina, where essentially blacks are rioting because a thug with a gun was killed by police when he turned to them with the gun, which I always thought was kind of, what is supposed to happen, basically. There's one citizen has been shot by another citizen and is in critical condition. I don't think he's died, but he was on life support last time I checked. The dashboard video shows this guy, Keith Scott. They were trying to exercise a warrant. Keith Scott was not the guy the warrant was for. They told him to get out of the car so they could check him out. He stepped out with the gun, and one of the cops shot him. And the police chief, Care Putney, explained to reporters that they asked him, did he point the gun directly at the police officer? Like the cop is supposed to wait and find out. And Chief Putney explains what the law is about this.
The totality of the situation is what carries the day. So if I'm making gestures, if I'm focusing in, if I'm turning my body in a certain way to look aggressive and to give you the understanding that an imminent threat is very, very likely, and I'm armed, all of those things in conjunction with one another can still give you that perceived threat under North Carolina law.
Okay, obviously, I mean, that makes sense to anybody who's paying an attention. Guy, you're out there, you're trying to get home to your wife and kids, you're trying to keep the neighborhood safe, but also not get blown away by some nutbag or some thug with a gun. Guy steps out of the, I mean, think about it for a minute. The police say, would you step out of the car, please? Yeah, and I'm going to bring my gun with me, What do you mean you're going to shoot me? I don't get it. All right, so now let's just go back and remember. I want to go back in time just a little bit. This is just a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. Let's not forget that Barack Obama has lent credence to this Black Lives Matter hate movement from the start. He is the guy who has emphasized every time a black officer, this guy, the officer was black here too, but he has emphasized that black people are being mowed down by police, which statistics show is absolutely untrue, that cops are much more likely to use force against white people or use deadly force against white people. But, the President of the United States has given credence to this movement. He was questioned in Madrid, Spain, because this president loves to go overseas and diss his country. And he was questioned about Black Lives Matter. And I want you to listen to his answer that he gave, about the riots growing out of Black Lives Matter.
One of the great things about America is that individual citizens and groups of citizens can petition their government, can protest, can speak truth to power. And that is sometimes messy and controversial, but because of that ability to protest and engage in free speech, America over time has gotten better. We've all benefited from that. The abolition movement was contentious. The effort for women to get the right to vote was contentious and messy. There were times when activists might have engaged in rhetoric that was overheated and occasionally counterproductive. But the point was to raise issues so that we as a society could grapple with them.
So it's the abolition movement It's the women's rights movement, and it gets just a little bit contentious and messy. Let's take a look at how contentious and messy this gets. Yeah, that's a little contentious, a little messy there. You know, for those of you who couldn't see it, that was a mob of black rioters kicking the living daylights out of a white man who was begging them for mercy, begging for mercy. So that was kind of like the suffragettes did that. You know, when they wanted the vote, you know, they would just go out and they would find some guy and, you know, kick him to death. And, you know, while he begged for mercy, abolition, you know, let's begin. We should begin with the premise here. I mean, abolition was to stop slavery. People were being held slaves. The suffragettes were fighting to get the franchise. Women wanted the right to vote. These people are complaining because a guy with a gun, waving gun at the police, was shot by the cops. Okay, that's the deal here. You know, my friend Glenn Reynolds, who does the wonderful Instapundit site, just a terrific, one of the original major blogs, basically. He has been suspended from Twitter because he saw rioters blocking traffic on the highways in Charlotte, and he tweeted, "Run them over. Run them over." Because what happens when you stop the cars, they surround you, they drag you out of the car, they rock your car, they can turn over the car, so he said, just run over them. So they suspended him from Twitter. They don't suspend, you know, there are Twitter accounts with the title "F the Police." I checked this morning. They're not suspended. There are horrible things being said about white people. They're not suspended. This is the control of the narrative. The narrative has to be that these people are somehow oppressed, that this issue has legitimacy. Every fact we have, everything we know, and we had Heather McDonald on, who has studied this stuff and reported on it and gone into the streets and reported on it. Everything we know shows that this narrative is false. This is a false narrative. The police are not killing black people, you know, in some untoward way. And again, there's so many people in this country, so many police officers in this country, so many incidents in this country, that the couple of times a year that something goes wrong and somebody does something, a lot of times it may be just they made a mistake in the moment of danger. But the assumption that because one person is black and the other person is white, race was an issue is just a false narrative assumption. And of course, now Hillary Clinton, the polls are closing on her. She's still ahead, according to the Wall Street Journal. I don't know how it just speaks about who these two people are, that she's still ahead, but she is clinging to her lead. So now she goes on and she seizes on this, and she thinks she can play this narrative to gain votes. Now, this is her speaking, here's her seizing on the Black Lives Matter narrative.
I need to say something about two very upsetting incidents that took place over the past few days. First, an unarmed man named Terrence Crutcher was shot and killed by a police officer in Tulsa. Then a man named Keith Lamont Scott was shot and killed by a police officer in Charlotte. I'm sending condolences and prayers to their families. I know a lot of you are as well. There is still much we don't know about what happened in both incidents, but we do know that we have two more names to add to a list of African Americans killed by police officers in these encounters. It's unbearable, and it needs to become intolerable. We also saw the targeting of police officers in Philadelphia last week. And last night in Charlotte, 12 officers were injured in demonstrations following Keith Lamont Scott's death. Every day, police officers across our country are serving with extraordinary courage, honor, and skill.
Now, I wanted to play that whole thing. I didn't want to isolate the part where she says it's intolerable that guys with guns are being shot by officers with guns. I can tolerate that, by the way. So I have no problem with that at all. I sleep better at night, in fact. I find it very, very tolerable when police officers kill random guys getting out of their cars waving guns at them. I can fully tolerate that. But then she goes on to do the Democrat two-step, which is so you can go back and look at that and say, yeah, but I didn't say you should go out and kill cops in Dallas. Obama does this too. I said nice things about the police too, but there is no moral equivalence. I mean, think back for a minute to Care Putney, the police chief we saw at the opening of the show. Think back to David Brown, the massively great police chief in Dallas. He was the police chief in Dallas. I'll get back to that in a minute. And then just look at, this is a guy who says that he is the dead guy's brother, Lamont Scott's brother. This is the other side.
Anything we should know?
No. You just know that all white people are devils.
And make sure you air that one.
Air that.
Don't take that
All
one.
white cops are devils and white people. Y'all are devils. I don't like none of you all.
It wasn't a white cop who shot this guy. It was a black cop who shot the guy. I mean, what is this about? And this is what is driving me crazy, is these guys, these black police officers and black police chiefs who are so obviously all-American heroes are being lumped in with guys like that. I got to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube, but come on over to the Daily Wire and hear the rest.